Welcome to Alan Skorsky Reports. I'm Alan Skorsky. Last November, the Heritage Foundation, regarded by many as the preeminent conservative think tank, hit an earthquake when its president, Kevin Roberts, refused to distance the foundation from Tucker Carlson following his interview with Groyper snot-nosed Nick Fuentes. At least 5 members of the anti-Semitism task force and several high-profile board members, including prominent scholar Robert P. George, resigned in protest. Facing extreme pressure, Kevin Roberts formally apologized to staff and publicly denounced Nick Fuentes' ideology. With the historic rise of anti-Semitism from the Islamist Marxist alliance following the October 7th slaughter and massacre of over 1,200 Israelis at the hands of Hamas, what followed never could have been predicted. Instead of Western democracies offering support for Israel, the true colors of the left were revealed across Europe, Australia, Canada, and on many American university campuses. But the real betrayal felt by many in Jewish conservative circles came from blindsided attacks from past friends like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, and Megyn Kelly, to name a few. Today's guest is Heritage Foundation visiting fellow and co-chair of the conference, or for the conference, of Christian Presidents for Israel, Luke Moon, who spent last decade focusing his attention on raising awareness about persecuted Christians in the Middle East and encouraging Christian support for Israel and the Jewish people. Today we will talk about the new direction at Heritage, combating the rise of anti-Semitism from the Tucker Carlson wing of the so-called right, and why Christian support for Israel is so critical. Professor Moon, it's an honor to have you, sir.
Thank you very much,
I'm
Alan.
gonna. I have to give you a title. So if it's not doctor,
Okay.
it's gonna be professor.
I'll take it. I'll take
Okay.
whatever you want to give me.
Okay. So my first question is this. There are a couple of very famous Jewish comedians. One of them is a guy named Modi. Very funny guy. And he once told an audience the definition of anti-Semitism is disliking Jews more than you have to. And again, it's funny.
It
But
is.
but we're seeing it here now. See, from the left, it's an ideological and agenda-driven hatred of Israel and the Jews. From people
Mhm.
like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, I'm going to leave Candace Owens aside because she's just lost her mind.
Right.
Well, they all have, but Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, it seems like they found a niche or a niche in attacking Israel. Tucker Carlson never had a problem with Israel or Jews. I mean, while he was at Fox News, he was never like Sean Hannity. He was never a big cheerleader, but he was always kind of on our side. And then he kind of just, whatever triggered him, he went there. So, but I want to begin though in a different direction because your focus has been on the slaughter of Christians in the Middle East and Africa, a
Yeah.
topic that has been richly and purposely, in my opinion, ignored. So if you would begin first, talk about what you've done in that field, and then it'll segue into the anti-Semitism.
Yeah. I mean, when I started doing this work full time in 2014, it was right when ISIS was running roughshod over the Christians of northern Iraq, and I was really concerned by how, in a lot of cases, there would be refugee camps for Shia, for Sunnis, for all kinds of Muslims.
Right.
But the Christians had nowhere to go. There was no Christian refugee camps in the whole of Iraq. Instead, Christians had to flee. There was a bunch in Jordan. There was, like, in northern Iraq. They were sleeping in shopping malls that were yet unfinished. And so we began to obviously raise awareness about that and talk to people about and really kind of raise money and support, blankets and medicine and that kind of thing. But it in 2014 there was almost 500,000 Christians in Iraq. Today there's less than 185,000. So there's more Christians in Israel than there are left in Iraq. And Iraq, as you might
Right.
imagine, is a much, much larger country with a much larger population. But I remember standing on a bridge in northern Iraq talking to a Christian guy who talked about how he used to play. He remembers playing with Jews as a kid. He was an older guy. And he said, I wish I knew than what I know now. And there's a saying amongst jihadis, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people.
Right.
First they drive out the Christians or the Jews, and then
Right.
they drive out the Christians.
Right.
And that's a consistent pattern all across the region. The other thing that happens, and you see this actually, this shows up in the news quite regularly within the last several years, is the Islamists use Christian sites to launch their attacks against Israel, knowing that the response back will damage or destroy or harm the Christian site of the Christian home, and therefore they can then use that to gin up
Right.
support from basically American Christians who aren't paying attention.
Right.
Rachel Campos Duffy, who was a Fox News Sunday morning Fox and Friends host, and Saturday actually too. She when she interviewed JD Vance about a month ago on the show, she said to JD, I'm really concerned about the Christians in Lebanon. Tens of thousands have been displaced and thousands have been killed. And I was like, Rachel, that's not true at all. It's nine. Nine Christians have been killed in northern Iraq, and we actually know the names of all of them and how they died, and none of them were targeted by Israel. So it's like it's like when African Americans are asked about police brutality and they say, oh, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, it's turned out to be single digits, right? Like it's
Right.
that kind of framing. But people just they when you come under your certain sectors of consumption of information,
Right.
particularly for Hershey's Catholic, you're not going to get a full deep dive into the truth of what's going on because there's too many actors involved that want to paint a negative picture of Israel.
Right. So the leftist, the Marxist, Islamist alliance, they're not interested. They don't care about Christians. But
Right.
people like Tucker Carlson, and I forgot what her name is, that pretty blonde from California who discovered that she's a Catholic now.
Oh yeah, Carrie Pagine Bowler.
There you go. Right. So now all of a sudden these are Christians.
Yeah.
But they will never ever talk about Christian persecution at the hands of Muslims.
Right.
Tucker Carlson, I watched him give multiple interviews to religious figures in Israel, and he'll always ask them, "Have you ever been spat on?"
Right.
Now we know, and again, I mean, we've seen it, that there are some very poorly behaved kids in
Mm-hmm.
Israel, like anywhere. I mean, it's like saying, "Do you ever walk in the street and someone, shout a slur at you?" It happens, but he's trying to say that this is like Israeli culture or Israeli policy, but yet he will never raise a word about how many the hundreds of thousands of Christians who were beheaded, burned, the Christian cops in Egypt.
Yeah.
How many of them were killed by the Muslim Brotherhood? Hamas is the Muslim Brotherhood.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. No, it's quite frustrating because what happens is there's just there's a lot of ignorance, but there is a concerted effort with it by some and by self-identified Christians who are so committed to this claims against Israel that what they do is anytime there's an incident of Jews attacking Christians of any kind, they then will post that on Twitter or X, and then they'll kind of send that up to the Vatican News Service, and then the Vatican News Service, which is like the Vatican's wire service, it goes to 10,000 outlets around the world, and the next thing you know, everybody's up in arms. But there's a the thing is, like, Jews also read the news, and they see this consistent attack against Jews by Christians. And so, there's in the Bible, there's the golden rule: do unto others if you would like them to do unto you. Right? So if you're going around all the time attacking Jews, attacking Israelis, like insulting them, maligning them, trying to kill them, like, don't be surprised if Jews spit at you, right? Like, what do you expect? Like, if like, it seems like a very human nature orientation. If everybody, I mean, take anywhere else in the world, where, like, you're you're a Protestant walking on the Catholic side of the line in Belfast, Northern Ireland. You think you're going to get treated like, you know, with candy and roses as you walk down the street? Of course not. Like, there's lots of these types of situations, but Israel, for some reason, is the one place where it rises to
Yeah.
the top of international incidences anytime anything happens.
But just so you know, though, I am not at all condoning
Nor am
those
I.
people
Nor
who
am I.
spit on Christians, because what I suspect is these are probably punk kids. And I don't know what they heard at school or at home, but it's not something that is part of Judaism. There's no commandment to it. It's disgraceful, and in fact, and it's a grave sin to do that.
No,
So,
and
yeah,
the Israeli government is very committed to
yeah,
try and put an end to it. There's
yeah,
been statements by chief
yeah,
rabbis, by the top rabbis,
yeah.
by right wing Jewish organizations, right wing parliamentarians, like members of Knesset, etc. All have spoken out against it. So it's not certainly not an institutional thing.
Exactly. And that was my point, though, that Tucker Carlson wants to make it
Oh
something
yeah, for
while
sure.
ignoring while ignoring what Muslims are doing to Christians, and furthermore, trying to establish a greater relationship between Muslims and Christians. And he himself
Right.
is really not, I mean, I don't follow him that much, except I was on the internet, but I don't even think that, I mean, is he even a regular church goer, Sunday church goer?
Well, Tucker's not. Tucker has grew up Episcopalian. He had I think a conversion encounter, like a adult conversion,
Well,
within the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years. Um, I was at an event in Westchester County with Megan Kelly and Tucker, and
hmm,
he talked at that event about having read the Bible for the first time, cover to cover. And, it's, I think, you know, there was a moment. So Tucker and I communicated quite frequently for the last couple of years. And there was a point at the end of, it was the end of the year, where, maybe it's the beginning of this year, where Tucker reached out to a friend of mine and said, "What do I need to do to, get past the anti-Semitism label, etc." And my friend asked me, "What would you advise him to do, Luke?" And I said, "Well, he needs to throw, Candace and Nick Fuentes under the bus. He needs to speak out against Islam." And I said, the only people that can, essentially wash all the anti-Semitism juice off him is is pastors. So he needs to interview a bunch of pastors and kind of talk about faith and whatever. Just get, like, there's 10,000 other topics you can talk about. You don't have to talk about Israel all the time. Like
right,
you like
right,
there's lots of people. I have normal conversations all the time with people about a lot of topics, and none of them have to do with Israel. So
right.
he didn't have to go there, but he chooses to.
Right. So he is obsessed with Israel. Um, he said that Ben Shapiro celebrated the death of children in Gaza. Now, again, that's just a bona fide lie. Ben Shapiro never ever said that. I don't even have to Google it. I just know he never said it. He interviewed Cenk Uygur, who is a very known virulently, he's a Turkish guy who's very,
Yep.
very anti-Semitic, very anti-Israel, anti-Semitic both. Um, so he is obsessed with it. And it's funny because guys like Nick Fuentes and others, they almost wear the badge of anti-Semitism as a badge of honor. Look, the Jews recognize me, and I must be getting under their skin. But I've heard from a few. I remember when Danny Danon, the ambassador from Israel to the UN, said that Tucker called him and asked him, "How do I get off that list of anti?" So I don't know. It seems to bother him, yet he's totally obsessed with Israel and Jews who support Israel. So I don't really
Well, he
get what
also
it
is
is.
obsessed with Christians that support Israel too.
Right.
And the thing is,
Yes.
he also, I mean, the problem was, like, within a few days of my recommendations to him, because that was
Uh,
passed on, like he doubled down, and
yep.
it's like he's not actually interested in changing his ways. I'm of the mind, there's a verse in the Hebrew Bible, this famous one. It was like used in the exchange between Tucker and Ted Cruz, which is, I Genesis 12:3, I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse
Right.
you. And the thing is, like, the blessings don't happen immediately, right? Like, if I'm nice to a Jew, it's not like cash falls out of heaven, right? Like, it's, and I think, but the blessings do grow over time. I'm a firm believer in that. I believe I've been blessed as a result of the work I get to do. And I believe that the curses grow over time too. I don't think Tucker started out like when he didn't go from 0 to 100 in a couple episodes. It took a couple years actually, and it just begins to become an obsession. And I've seen this with a bunch of my other progressive friends that used to post on Facebook, every generic progressive cause you can imagine. It was LGBT, it was the environment, it
Right.
was Me Too, it was like you pick your, cause du jour of the moment, and they would post about it. And now these guys, the only thing they talk about is Palestinian stuff
Right.
and anti-Israel stuff and attacking Israel.
Right.
And the difference between you start off the difference between the left and the right on
Yeah.
this. The thing is, the left is the left's anti-Israel manifests itself as pro-Palestinian. At least that's the narrative. Mind you, it really is anti-Israel, but nevertheless, they'll couch it in
Right.
Palestinian, pro-Palestinian language. On the right, that's not. They don't care about the Palestinians.
All right.
I mean, Tucker and company, they try. I mean, the best they can do is try and make it about, talk about Islam writ large. Um, but that doesn't gain any traction. I take a lot of right wing, new right guys to Israel, guys who are in Tucker's orbit, people who are on the Christian nationalist side, the new right side, whatever you want to call it. And the thing that they are completely uninterested in the Palestinian stuff. I mean, I take them to Bethlehem just so they can check it off their
Right.
list, but it almost makes it worse. And for the Palestinians, if there was ever an attempt
Right.
to get them to like fall in love with Israel, with the Palestinians, it doesn't happen. And actually, the thing that these guys are coming, either they're neutral in Israel or they're negative, and I can get them 1 degree. I get the negative ones neutral. I get the neutral ones positive. And there's two instances that really changed the thing. One is visiting a Mechina, which is a pre-military academy in Israel, where they walk in and they see 200 18-year-old guys reading Bible, talking philosophy, talking leadership, and they're just blown away by what they see. And then the big families at the Shabbat table.
Right.
And those two things like change them. And because
Hmm.
it goes from indifference to, hey, this is it, envy is not the right word because it's more like um it's not a negative envy. It's like oh, they're doing it. We can do it too. Right? Like that's the attitude that people come away with.
Right.
And I think it is important because it actually makes my job a lot easier because I don't have to try and sell
Right.
I don't have to sell Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians. I just got to sell Israel versus
Right.
Israel or versus the perception of Israel.
Right. So let me ask you this also. And I've done a lot of shows about this, about combating anti-Semitism. And clearly we're losing. We're getting our butts killed. We are. One reason is we're overwhelmed by the numbers. There are 2 billion Muslims in the world. I said, even if only half of them are anti-Semitic, I think it's more, but let's say even half, that's a billion. There are 15 million Jews in the world. Half of us suck. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Rahm Emanuel was just in Israel. Perfect example of a sucky Jew. Okay, and he's not even as bad as some of the others. That's how bad it is. So we're outnumbered. Number two, they're playing to win, whereas we play defense. We think that if we get the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism passed, as a victory. Okay, you know what? It's like having a great website, but no one comes to see it. And so we're not winning the war on anti-Semitism because we're not fighting it. We're on defense, and that's something I also want to address. But I want to, give you the floor to, respond to that as well.
Yeah, so as part of the National Task Force, one of the things that we just did an event in May, and I put forth a pledge that included a new definition of anti-Semitism. And because one of the things that I found is that when I would go and I have a friend who's in the Ohio State Legislature, and they were working through passing definition of anti-Semitism,
Right.
and the fight was the IHRA definition versus Obama's definition, and the Obama definition doesn't have anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. Whereas the problem with the IHRA is that it actually starts with a perception of hatred of Jews or non-Jews. Da, 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 da. And the problem with that language is that it means it's in your head, right? Which means I'm like having to police someone's thoughts, or it's the perception language is very weak, which is why you can't get guys like Chip Roy to sign on to it, because it's too nebulous. It's too thought policing language. So what I put forth as a definition of anti-Semitism was that it's actions or statements against Jews individually or collectively. Okay, which means that you have to have done something. You just can't have bad thoughts in your head. Dude, I have bad thoughts in my head all the time. Like I mean, you can list out all the things, right? But you can't police people's thoughts, but you can police people's actions, or at least call them out, or once they've done something, then you can point to it and say
Right.
that's wrong, right? But the problem is there's a lot of what I'm trying to do with that definition is really actually force the left to have to defend IRA, because I've put something to the right that the right can then lean on as a
Right.
definition. To your point about playing defense, here's the thing: is that it's not just playing defense, but we're generally not willing to do what the other side does.
Right.
We don't there's all the Pallywood fake videos, the kids, in the blizzard in Gaza, right? And like, 3/4 of a billion people, or 3/4 of a million people, shared that video, believing that there's kids suffering in a blizzard in Gaza.
Right.
It's absurd,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff comes out a lot, and I don't feel um, like our side is willing to do those kinds of things that the other side is doing, and we're and that's pretty consistent across the board. I mean, you have they're putting on press helmets and vests,
Right.
and then run around with guns, launch rockets. You have the use of hospitals and ambulances, the use of mosques and churches and schools. All that stuff is as far as uh, the Islamist side is all acceptable for war. There are no rules. I mean, the rules of war came out of Christian Europe, not Muslim Middle East, and they don't follow them. They just don't.
So one of the things that I want is that defining anti-Semitism is one thing. I think we need to define those who are the purveyors of it.
Oh yeah,
We don't attack those. See, they have attacked Zionists. They've made
right.
Zionists a target. Who's our target? We don't. How come we don't have a target? How come there's no one saying that Palestinianism is a hoax, that it's a terrorist entity that was invented in 1964 by Yasser Arafat. And there is no slur, call whatever you want, I don't care, but there is no term that we are painting onto those who are the biggest purveyors of anti-Semitism. And I said this before also. 1930s Germany, I get it. The slogan was master race, Germany for Germans. I don't like it, but I get it, sort of.
Right.
Who's attacking us here? This isn't America for Americans and Jews aren't American enough. We are being attacked by an entity who came here from another part of the world where they hate us, they hate America, and we're giving them permission to attack Jews and America on American soil. So this is an unprecedented kind of anti-Semitism, and we're letting them do it. And I remember at the DNC convention, Joe Biden saying of the Hamas protesters outside, some of them have a point. Okay. So you know what? You just gave them the record to go and do it.
Well, I would say with we've been doing it, or at least the organizations I've been running have been doing it. The thing is, like I run an organization. I'm founder of an organization called Generation Zion, which is it mobilizes and equips Gen Z to stand with Israel and Jewish people. I'm obviously not Gen Z, so it's actually
Right.
run by Gen Z folks.
Right.
But its target number one is actually the Groypers, because we're primarily targeting the anti-Semitic right in that
Right.
effort. Because I don't want to happen on the Republican Party what's happened in the Democratic Party with DSA,
Right.
right? So I think there you have to have a target, but I also organized the largest Christian majority march in support of Israel in the United States after October 7th in 2024, which was outside of Columbia University. And the reason why we were able to get so many people out was because people actually want the enemy to be named. If you name the enemy,
Right.
you can actually get a lot more people to show up
Yep.
because there's something to fight. Whereas
Right.
if you're coming like, hey, come show your support for Israel,
Right.
it's there's a bunch of events that I go to where they want to have a positive message because they want to contrast the negative message
Right.
of the Hamasniks, whatever. Okay. The problem is that if you only have good cops, you're never going to move the needle.
Right.
I mean, I have somewhere on my desk a copy of uh, the Jewish Defense League. Not that I'm a like an advocate of the Kahanas, but
Right.
I like the only reason Soviet Jewry got out of the Soviet Union
Yep.
was because of the Jewish Defense League
Right.
was causing the kind of trouble that they caused.
Right.
They would block the runway at JFK so that Aeroflot planes couldn't come to the gate. They
Right.
would harass the embassy staff every day. They would always be just causing all kinds of
Right.
malicious activity, and I mean, it's really hard to you know advocate for that, but nonetheless, if you don't have a bad cop to back up your good cop,
Right.
you're actually not going to move the needle as much as you want, and
Exactly.
it means, I mean, I've been to tons and tons and tons of anti-Israel rallies. I actually I quite enjoy. I read all their stuff and I go to all their conferences, go to their things because
Right.
I'm a sucker for punishment. But I just love you know the seeing inside the enemy camp, right?
Sure.
And one of the things that is so consistent is there's always um, the National Lawyers Guild standing around. Why? Because as soon as someone does something bad, the National Lawyers Guild is right there to bail them out, to get them off the hook, to talk to the cop, to get charges dropped or get charges reduced. Get like the other side in terms of
Yeah.
playing the game is much better at on the organizational, like the edginess,
Yep.
right? Like when was the last time um, someone on our side got arrested for standing up against the anti-Semites? Like, you know, I mean, there's clergy always will often get arrested in the rotunda for like, you'll see some female rabbi getting arrested for, abolish ICE or something like that. But I'm talking like like a conservative Zionist.
Right.
We don't do it. We don't do that stuff.
Right.
And I think if we want to actually win, we have to do it.
So that's something I was going to say also because we often hear that it's not the left, it's just the loudest voices. I said, well, you know what? They've got a lot of loudest voices and we've got zero loudest voices. And that's again part of the problem. Look at again, and you talk about the DSA. I remember when Cortez and the other squad members, I remember there were just four of them
Yeah.
last decade. And it's just four voices. Well, you know what? Now those just four voices now own the Democratic Party. I laugh. I wish that Graham Plattner had not dropped out of the race. I want him to stay in there because he represents what the Democrats are today, and I don't want them to be able to hide from it. The
Right.
Elizabeth Warrens, the Bernie Sanders, the Ro Khannas, all of them need to be so publicly shamed. And this is something I read years ago from Al Franken when him and Michael Moore were like, the threats to conservatives,
Right.
that, they said, scorn and ridicule, scorn and ridicule. Well, Franken always makes fun of people. That's what he does. But again, we don't have, again, now you're talking about stuff that you do, and I'm thrilled to hear it. And I need to read more about it. But we don't have that on our side though. And again, it's part of our behavior. We won't disrupt Grand Central Station. We won't block the roads to JFK. We won't light off those green and red, fogs anywhere in public, but they do, and they're winning.
Yeah, yeah, they are the DSA certainly on the Democratic side they're winning. On the conservative side, I don't think they're yet winning. I think we're still holding the line.
Right,
All the data is still in our favor. It's a very small group. I was at TPUSA's America Fest in December. They did a
right,
poll of the people there. It was about 30,000 people. About 70% were Gen Z, and they asked, "Is Israel our best ally? Is Israel our worst ally? Or is Israel an ally like everybody else?"
right.
And only 13% said Israel is our worst ally. Okay, the 37% said Israel our best ally, and everybody else was in the middle. And then I was at CPAC in Dallas, and there was a poll. Israel is a strong ally of the United States, and it was is agree or disagree. Only 11% disagreed.
Right.
Okay, so and that was more mixed than young, but nonetheless, it was the polls are still
Right.
in our favor. Okay, on the DSA side, on the Democrat side, in my newsletter today, I there's a woman named Francesca Hong in Wisconsin.
Yes,
She's
running for governor.
for the governor. They got primaries in August,
Yeah.
and she's ahead currently. She's DSA, and I talked about this in my newsletter that you have in her. She was on a podcast the other day, and she said um, that there will be no liberation of the world without the liberation of Palestine.
Right.
And what that means, I think it means actually, is the destruction of Israel, the liberation of Palestine is the destruction of Israel. And in a lot of ways, and I'll perhaps get a little bit philosophical, metaphysical, but I think that to some degree, the uh, the Democratic Socialists see Israel as a stand-in for God. And the Marxists and Islamists hate the God of the Bible above all else. I mean, it's like every time the communists took over, the first thing they do is shut down the churches. When the Islamists take over, they shut down the synagogues and the churches. Why? Because in both instances, the competition to their idea is preeminently found within the churches and the synagogues, but most of the churches. And I mean, Karl Marx was asked, who in Britain do you hate the most? And his answer was a guy named Charles Spurgeon. Charles Spurgeon in the late 1800s was a a um, a revivalist preacher who is leading thousands and thousands of working class Brits to faith in Jesus. And he was taking away the army that Marx wanted to bring about his revolution.
Right.
And that model of the hatred of Christianity and the hatred really of the God of the Bible is a preeminent feature of the DSA. And so to me, one of the big things I'm after, and I'm working on this with Heritage, is how do we take this on directly, legislatively, but I really believe that we have to have, like, the grassroots has to fight the grassroots.
Right.
Okay. And what is the grassroots army that's going to fight back against the Democratic Socialists? I think it's going to be the people who believe the Bible is true, and that is Christians and conservative Jews. Okay, like that's the grassroots army that's going to fight back against the DSA, because that's the army that has most to lose if we lose, right? Like, Alan, I don't know that we'll get to choose our, cellmate in the gulag if we lose, but
Right.
I like you tonight, so maybe it's you.
The UK, they've got Tommy Robinson in London.
Yeah.
We don't have people like that here, at least not that I can think of. Um,
Well, I do. I don't think we're as far. I don't think we're at the point in which the UK is at
oh
yet.
no, they're completely gone. Yeah.
And they're completely gone. But I do know there's a lot of guys who are pushing back at this aggressively. I mean, I run in those circles. So
Okay.
it is it's obviously doesn't, make national news most of the time. But we do have a lot of people who are aggressively attacking this, and rightly so.
Okay.
And they're on the good side. I think, our social media is actually in a much better spot than it is in anywhere else in the world in terms of this stuff. We're not winning on social media, but we're not losing by any means. In a big way, we're losing battles. We're not losing the war. And I think Tucker is not as strong as he was a year ago. And Candace, man, she is flailing about today, right? Because everything, she's pitched her cause, hitched her wagon to Tyler Robinson,
Right.
being a being
A tool of Israel.
of the Jews, or
Yeah.
even not the guy, was
Yeah.
some other shooter, the
Yeah.
grassy knoll, right? But nonetheless, I think we're actually, I'm more optimistic about um, about our prospects for the long haul. And I've been reading the last several weeks a lot of DSA literature. I asked AI what
Right.
give me the DSA book club reading list,
Right.
and it's a hot mess of garbage, but nonetheless, it's really, really insightful. And I expect over the next several months we'll have a really robust strategy on how to take them on, because
Right.
we got to defeat them.
See, what I'd love to do again, and like these guys like Frank Scales and Nick Shirley, these guys who go around. I mean, these guys remind me of me when I was their age. I mean, I was a kind of a little bit of a badass. When I was in college, I was the first pro-Israel activist at Wayne State University in Detroit. And by the end
Yeah.
of my first year, every Arab on campus knew who I was. But like one question I would ask if I had the time, every time I see Bernie Sanders or Warren, I would ask them, will you be endorsing any more Nazi tattooed candidates? Or, I mean, and just never let them live this down. He was
Yeah.
the worst. You think about, when was it? A few years ago, we had George Santos, right?
Hmm.
Who lied, and,
Right.
from New York's third district.
Yeah. Yeah.
Compare him to those, to Plattner. you know.
Well, not even Flanders, the guy that the guy in New Jersey that won the primary, who was he supported Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then there's the woman in San Antonio. She didn't win her primary,
Right.
but said Zionists need to be put in a concentration camp
Right.
and castrated.
Yep.
Okay, those are the ones, like one of those won and another one lost.
Right.
But like we have DSA candidates. There's 38 that have won. There's 38 that have lost, and there's another 70 to go this
Wow.
cycle. Okay, and I think, I mean, if this woman, Francesca Hong in Wisconsin, if she gets the Democratic nomination, I think we do actually have a fairly good chance of the Republicans winning the
Yeah.
the the governorship. Because some of these, it the devil always overreaches. And
Yeah,
it
that's what I hear.
it
But
will come. We will win.
you see the mayor of Boston, and you're just seeing them everywhere. It's just to me, it's sickening. So let me ask you, I guess, a final question.
Mhm.
What is the Christian reason? Leaving out the scripture says, I'll bless those who bless Israel, but what is the Christian reason for supporting Israel and the Jewish people
There's
that can resonate with someone
yeah,
who's not
well,
so well versed?
yeah, I don't actually use Genesis 12:3 at all ever.
Uh,
There's another verse that I use most often. It's in the book of Romans, and it's talking to Gentiles. I'm not Jewish at all. I'm a European mutt. I might
uh.
look a little bit Jewish, but this guy got none.
Where does
And
Moon come from? Luke Moon.
it was a regiment of bodyguards given from the King of Denmark to the King of England
Right.
back in the day. And when they finished
Okay.
their tour, they took on the surname. And my ancestors came over with William Penn. If you fly into Pittsburgh, you'll fly by a water tower that says Moonville. That's my people.
Wow. Okay.
Uh,
Cool.
but the one of our main figures in Christianity, Saint Paul, um, in talking to Gentiles, says to Gentiles, the root sustains you, you don't sustain the root. Meaning, like, your faith, the stuff that you believe is rooted in the covenant of God with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the plan and redemptive plan of God with the Jewish people, that we who are Gentiles get to partake in a spiritual way. And that's the case I make. It's a very and I I think that the reason that Christians are hated around the world, um, is because they don't know any Jews to hate, or they don't have, or they're all gone, right?
Yeah.
Like the Jews are the first target. We're the second. We really
Right.
are, and it's because there's a lot to say about the enemy. There's a spiritual battle. I mean, Alan, I was a missionary for 12 years. And the kind of missionary I was in what we called restricted access countries, which is countries where I'm not supposed to be a Christian, or I'm not supposed to do Christian stuff.
Right.
And so I've been thinking recently about how much of what I did was very kind of like what DSA does, because my whole modus operandi was spreading a message within a nation subversively, uh, organizing groups organically, so nobody was paid, obviously, and just getting the message out. And I did
Right.
all kinds of stuff all over the place. And I one of the things that you have, if you see the Islamists, they'll put their prayer rugs and do their prayers like outside. There was a synagogue, a girls' synagogue here, or school in New York, where a bunch of Islamists put their prayer rugs in front of it. There was
Right.
a bunch of, like, they did it in Times Square. They do it
Yep.
all over the place, right? Well, there's this concept within Christianity, where we call prayer walking, where we'll do, like, go pray over areas of a city or whatever. Like, they've adopted the same ideas.
Yep.
In the picture behind you, the Salah ad-Din walled up the eastern gate of the Temple Mount, and he put a Muslim synagogue in front of it. Why? Because he also read Zechariah, which says that the Messiah will come on the Mount of Olives, and he will walk down from the Mount of Olives and come through the eastern gate. So what he does, he blocks up the eastern gate. Okay, puts a Muslim cemetery in front of it because you can't have a holy man that walks through a graveyard. Okay,
Right.
I mean, Hamas said that one of the reasons they attacked when they did was because of the red heifers. And then they're like, so the Muslims actually believe the stuff of our book more than perhaps even a bunch of Christians and Jews I know. Right? Like it's wild to me that like the stuff that they are doing that is rooted in their understanding of 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 our God.
Right. Chairman, I can call you chairman, right? If people want to like read more about you, now I certainly want to know more about the work you're doing because I'm learning a lot of things about you tonight. How do we, like, again, I found you on Facebook, but do you have like, how do people,
Yeah,
reach
I
you and
so
contact
so
you?
I it our the work I do among Gen Z is at Generation Zion. So that website's gen-zion.org. So
Right,
we do a lot of training and a lot of
right,
kind of activist type events. I put out a weekly newsletter. It's at twohammers.com. So you can it's very easy. Number two and hammers.com.
right,
That's named after two of my heroes. One is Judas the Hammer Maccabeus, who defeated the pagans who were
right,
offering a pig on the altar of the temple.
right.
And the second hammer is Charles the Hammer Martel, who defeated the Muslims at the Battle of Tours. And so, named after the two fights we got to fight the pagans and the Muslims.
So
So,
it wasn't MC Hammer then.
no,
Okay, okay, I was waiting for it. Okay. Uh, Luke Moon, chairman of Christian Presidents for Israel.
yeah. The
Okay.
Christian College Conference of Christian Presidents for
All
Israel.
right, okay.
Yep.
So it was an honor to have you. I'd love to have you back again because there's just so much that you have to offer, and again, your voice, your activism is more important today than ever before. So I thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me.